Welcome back to Academic Writing with Ella. Today we are going to be looking at the structure within a paragraph. We've talked already about the macro structure of an essay as a whole, and now we're going to be looking at a much closer level. So moving from essay as a whole to beyond a section, even just down to I want to make the singular point. How do I structure the paragraph to make that point? And the whole point of thinking of things at this very tiny granular level is to help build up the clarity that you need in making sure that you've made your point and you've made your point well, but also it provides a really nice way of reminding yourself to introduce the level of justification and criticality that you need to be consistently doing to move beyond a superficial level. So this video is for people who are currently at an okay or good level that want it to be great. This will really make a massive difference to what you're doing. But if you're at a great level and you're looking to make things excellent, this will also help, because it is, chances are you're already doing some of this already. And the difference between it being great and excellent is either that you're only doing it sometimes, but not all the time, or you're only doing half the job all the time and not the whole job consistently. So this is a video for everyone, and we're going to be looking at the structure within a paragraph for success. And so today we're going to go through following an example from a paper that I was involved in. So this is the first big piece of research that I was ever doing. And so back in 2020, 2021, during the COVID pandemic, I was part of a research group studying the mental health experiences of transgender young people in the UK. And so we did a mixed method study, and I'm going to be talking about the qualitative aspect because that was what I was primarily involved in. So I did the initial data analysis for this, and then I started developing the themes and was involved in the write-up. So we're going to be looking at stuff that, I mean, it was years ago, I can't remember which exact pieces I wrote, but a section of a paper that I would have been heavily involved in the writing of, and we're going to analyse and have a little look at how this structure plays out in there. Now, some of you might be familiar with what we're about to do. We are going to do the Peel structure format. Peel, you probably came across, I always think of it in relation to English GCSE, right? It's very good at bringing people up to the level of GCSE level writing, introducing the idea of how to make the points that you're using, and in sort of literature essays, highlighting the evidence from the text of why people didn't like Curly's wife, even though that she was literally just a woman. But thinking about this in relation to academic literature, you're doing that all the time. Your whole thing is, here is the evidence of why this is the point that I'm going to make. And so we're going to keep going with it. It works really well. We're going to keep going with the Peel. So if you're not familiar with Peel, it stands for Point, Evident, Explain, Link. So your point is, what are you even trying to say? What point are you trying to make? Your evidence is, how do we know this to be true? And that might be referring to, say, a quote from your data set, or that might be referring to an article that expresses this, whether you are quoting them or just saying, yeah, these guys said it first, and then explaining. And you want to explain the relevance of the point, how the point plays out, what does it look like in reality, how does this apply, why is this important to your reader, like why should they care? And so that explain section is always the bigger bit, and it is the interesting bit, and it is often, if you're looking at where do I put my analysis in, there. And then finally you do the link, and that link will do one of two things. That link will either link to the overarching topic that you're writing about and say, so this point shows the answer to the question that we're answering, and it's particularly useful if you're answering a specific question and you're like, here's another letter to my answer to that question. Or you will be linking to the next section. So you will be setting up your next point ready to go, and then that will make a really nice flow into the next part. And if you're thinking, I'm struggling to figure out that link, well then perhaps this piece needs to be moved into another area. So having a little think about where does your paragraph fit within everything else is important. That's not what we're doing. We're thinking about just within each paragraph, how should I structure it using Peel? So moving on to the qualitative aspect of the paper, right at the very beginning in the introductory paragraph, we can already see an example of Peel in practice. So within this whole green section, you have a point that says 3 themes were found within the paper. You've got evidence, go and have a look at table 4, and we don't have a link. Oh, we don't have a link, we do have a link, we don't have an explanation. It's an introductory paragraph, it doesn't really need it. But the link is onwards. Let's go have a look at this discussion. So already you can see a sort of a hint in the direction of a Peel paragraph. Then in the immediately following sentences, we're going to talk about the first theme, which was significant changes to people's mental health and well-being. And within that, we had significant positive changes and significant negative changes. So we're going to start looking at the significant changes, and we introduce that with this blue line, which was, it was evident that mental health had deteriorated during the initial stages of the pandemic. So that is our point, is that things got pretty bad for a lot of people. And we evidence that with our pink points. So the pink is showing from the qualitative comments. That's where we got our evidence. I mean, how else? But making it explicit and explaining what key points of that led us to conclude that mental health had deteriorated. And the key point of that was experiencing significant increase in symptoms of anxiety and depression. That's how we know that that point happened. So your evidence is looking, how do we know that? And it might be that you're citing somebody else's work or you're referring to your own results, but you can't just make a point and not justify it. You can't make a point and not say how you know that to be true. So this is where we're looking for how you know that to be true. And you'll also notice that this paragraph doesn't strictly follow P, then E, then E, then L, right? We've got some of the evidence comes before, and that was just about making the sentence structure more engaging. So it's okay if that bit of evidence comes before. That's not going to make it a problem, but it is just how this part was structured. And so once we've got our point and we've made our evidence, we're going to explain that. Why is that important to the reader to understand? How does this apply to the real world? What are the whys and the hows of this point? So if our point and our evidence is that people's mental health got worse, particularly in relation to anxiety and depression symptoms, why was that? Well, actually, we had loads of participants talking about how the loss of structure to their life, right, changes in school, being on furlough, all of those kind of things, meant that they didn't really have any meaningful activity and routine to their day. And that is a big trigger factor for a lot of mental health conditions arising. And one of the ways it arises, and again, this came through from a lot of the quotes, was people finding they had a lot more time for rumination, which is where you sit and stew on a thought. And so people were stewing on negative thoughts and often negative self-reflection and negative self-perception, and it was stewing, and there wasn't space for distraction and uplift and positive experiences that would normally bring you out of that stewing. And so that was our explanation for why this was happening. So the explanation part is ideal for bringing in justification and bringing in critical analysis of your point so that you can get that in. So this is often where people are missing out on. They've done the point and they've done the evidence. That gets you to a good. The great and excellent points are in the quality of your explanation. So how much depth do you give? So making sure that you're giving a thorough explanation to avoid being simply superficial. And then finally, we move on to the link. And what this link was rather than linking back to the whole paper as a total, we were linking on to the next part. And we were acknowledging that actually, as well as negative deterioration being a key point of this theme, we also saw some of the participants, they were a minority, but some of our participants had much better mental health. And we understood this as them being removed from negative environments. So for some participants, school was a very negative environment, workplace was a negative environment where there was a lot more misgendering especially, and so not having to be in those environments was really beneficial, particularly where home might have been more supportive. And so that was what the next paragraph is about, and we tee ourselves up, we set it up really nicely by saying, here's something else that's interesting, and then we move on to the positive, again in a point, evident, explain structure. So that is how it works in practice, and I think you can see now with those different sections what this actually looks like and why it works really effectively for communicating your ideas, not just simply communicating them in a clear way, but actually really concise. Stops you wandering about all over the place and trying to figure out what you want your point to be or how you want to explain it. Get to the point, say it, get on with it, explain why. Okay, now what? So really moving you through and allowing you to say a whole lot very, very quickly. So what I would like for you to do, and if you've been enjoying the video so far, give it a thumbs up, obviously, but what I would like you to do is go find a section that you have planned in an essay and where you have used the how to write a strong structure essay planning system that I've done in a different video. I'll link that in the description anyway. Find one of those bullet points. I'm going to use an example up here of if I were to compare MOCA and ACE, two different types of cognitive assessments that we use for dementia care. And so looking at, we're going to talk about MOCA. Okay, well, I need to introduce it. What even is it? And I need to provide evidence of that. But actually, I'm going to make points about its various strengths and limitations. And I've got 4 strengths and 2 limitations there. Each of those is going to be its own paragraph. And I think this is one of the places I find students will often make errors about how much is appropriate to have in one paragraph. There is only space for 1 point, because then you're going to eel each of your points. You're going to evidence it, you're going to explain it, you're going to link it. There's no room for another point. We've got to have a new paragraph. Otherwise, we're going to end up with one whole page of text that is overwhelming and difficult to fight your way through. So each of these bullet points, each of my strengths, each of my limitations will get its own paragraph. So a paragraph for it's a quick and easy tool that we can use, and another paragraph. The point is, it gives you a score that can be tracked. Fantastic. What is the evidence of that? I need a citation. How am I going to explain why is that a strength? Why is it a strength for this tool to give me a number so that when I assess my patient today, I can compare it to when I assess them 6 months into the future or 6 months into the past and compare that progression. And then we link to, here's another strength. So bringing it back through, or even not just here's another strength, linking it to here is an overall strength of the MOCA. So each of those points gets its own peel. So what I want you to do is take your structure, pick one of those points and have a go at bulking it out using the peel approach, and practice it with everything. With everything there's loads of practice, but that is my task that I'm going to give you to have a go at. So let me know how you get on in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos about academic writing skills and essay work, and I will see you very soon.